Hi everyone, it's Becky here. So I hope you're enjoying your Saturday morning and your weekend. So today I'm going to show you an urban sketch that I did last weekend. Okay, so my urban sketching tools are very minimal. So basically I have my watercolor sketchbook. This one is an Arteza watercolor sketchbook with etcher stickers on it. And this is my very basic material bag. This is a rag for watercolor cleaning. And in here I just have a clip, and I have a couple of drawing pens. All of these pens are waterproof. These are etcher fine liner pens. This one is an extra small brush pen, and I have 0.3 fine liner and 1.0 fine liner. And for watercolor painting, I use two water brushes. This one is very watery. It's a Holbein water brush. And this one is a DeSeras water brush from my local art supply store, DeSeras. And then I have my Etcher watercolors. It has 24 watercolors in it. So last weekend, I went out with my family and I had to wait for about 25 minutes. So I decided to sketch this view outside the car window. There's a 1-point perspective here of the road leading into the picture. Hey, so time fast forward to the future, back home. So now I'm reviewing the concepts of 1-point perspective that I observed from the car window. So here I have a frame, and this is the horizon line. It's pretty much covered by the houses and trees. So because of my experience sketching outdoors, I always know where the horizon line is, even though it's covered by everything else. And then here is the vanishing point. It's very important. The sidewalk line here and this sidewalk line here all going towards the vanishing point on the horizon. And same as the houses and the direction of the trees, the height of everything above the horizon. Since I know the placement of the sidewalk, I know where to place this car here on the other side of the street. Same as this car, right in front of my car. And the wooden rail on the side of the park. This tree behind the car over here, because it's organic, is not following strictly to the rule of the perspective. And then the next layer behind, I have the fence of the house, the tree around it, and the shape of the house behind the fence. Okay, it's all about layering, finding relationships between each objects in relation to height, size, and placement, and more trees on the right hand side and behind the houses. Alright, so these can be really loose. Okay, so since the perspective is really important in this drawing, this line here and this line here of the sidewalks, very important, and also the placement of the house. And other things we don't have to worry too much once we get the perspective lines correct. Time going backward to the day I did the urban sketching in my art journal. Okay, so here is my current art journal spread. I will sketch the view right over here. I will draw a frame first. So I'm just quickly drawing a rectangular frame just to fit everything inside easily. So I'm kind of using hand gestures to visualize the angle of the perspective first. And then I'm starting with this car in the foreground on the other side of the street first, at the starting point. This car is going to be a reference point for the rest of the objects. Okay, so here comes the first line of this 1-point perspective. So this is the wooden rail on the sidewalk of the park. Okay, so now I'm just drawing these short legs or the rail pieces. So these rail pieces closer to me are wider apart, and these ones are closer from each other. This is the idea of foreshortening in perspective. And another idea in perspective is that the things further from us looks smaller. As you can see, these cars here are much smaller than the car in the foreground. They're teeny tiny. All right, and now I'm drawing this huge car really close to me in front of my car. This is the largest car in this image. So now you can kind of tell the distance established by the sizes of these cars. So now I'm just adding details and a little more darker lines and darker shades for parts of the car, especially the windows, hatching to suggest shade. Okay, and there's another car in front of it. Okay, another perspective line pointing to the vanishing point. On the right hand side, somewhere on the car, and this quick simple line pointing to the vanishing point too. Now I'm beginning to draw this big tree right behind that car there, drawing the branches and twigs, like the main ones that is really obvious. I'm not drawing every single twigs, because that's too much work. Just trying to capture the essence. Okay, and I'm gonna leave it like that. I will paint the leaves. Now I'm connecting the triangle shapes of the rooftops behind the tree. So here is another layer of overlapping, adding some textures for the rooftops. And now drawing the main body part of the house, this little roof here. And now I'm drawing the fence, the pieces, drawing the wooden texture here with vertical lines. Now I'm drawing the windows on the house there. And I color in with solid black, so there's a bit of density for the house. Keep adding more rooftops. These rooftops are more squished because they're seen from the sideway. Now I'm drawing this person walking on the street just to give more idea of proportion. And keep drawing the rooftops. Just trust what I see instead of trying to draw what's really there. Because I'm seeing some of the houses from the side, the angle might be a little bit strange, but I'm just trusting what I see. Keep adding more windows and more house details, stairs, rails on the house. And paying attention to details like this sign on the street. And keep connecting more house details around it and the windows too. Now I'm starting to draw the outlines of the trees behind the houses. So in Vancouver, we have a lot of evergreen trees that are huge. These trees are adding another sense of depth and proportion. And I'm also keeping the lines really loose and not adding too much inner details because things in the distance have less details. Now I'm drawing the outline of the tree closer to me. This little tree trunk here and more bushes underneath. Adding a bit of leaf texture. adding more random details there and more loose textures for the bushes and trees. Keep it really simple. I'm not adding every single detail there. Just a few squiggly lines to suggest my impression. All right, just keep it simple. Right, so now I am adding some really simple short vertical hatching lines to suggest the density or the shade in the trees, just so they have more dimension. Just very quick, simple, short little vertical hatching marks. So I'm really trying to observe the shade part of the tree and just adding it with these hatching lines here and there. So I'm just adding these shade hatching lines around the darkest parts of the trees instead of shading heavily. I'm just keeping it really simple. And now I'm just adding some shadows that I see over there. It's very cloudy today and the sun is coming out a little bit. Sometimes the sunshine is gone, so there's not really a lot of shadows. The lighting is changing. Adding the shadow for the car here. Underneath too. For the car there. Now I'm ready to paint with my watercolors. So when painting a landscape, I always paint the sky first. So now I'm wetting the sky area with clear water and adding the first layer, cerulean blue. Very watery because the sky is not that dense. It's very transparent. Cerulean blue mixed with a little bit of ultramarine blue. It's quite cloudy, blending a little bit of purple to suggest the shade of the clouds. Keep it really light. The sky is much lighter compared to the trees and houses in the front. Now I'm just painting the road here using leftover colors, kind of grayish tone. Yellow for the grass, blending in some light green. Now I'm grabbing some raw sienna or dark brown to paint the houses that I see. The first layer is quite watery, and same for this rooftop over here. A darker brown for that roof there. Viridian green mixed with yellow ochre for the first layer of the trees in the distance. Again, this is very loose and watery. This is how the first layer of watercolor painting works. We don't have to be very specific in the beginning. Just laying on the very basic impressions and don't think too much about the details yet. This tree has more mix of light green. Now I'm painting the fence with this leftover color, a dark blue tone. So these cars are all black and gray ones. And then I mix my own black and gray by mixing ultramarine blue and purple together. So these cars look more alive compared to solid black ones. Okay, and just adding a really simple first layer for the tree, a mix of yellow ochre and brown, and a little bit of green. Okay, moving on to the second layer, I'm starting with the trees. So the second layer is a mix of viridian green and a little bit of brown and less water, so the color looks more dense. And adding on to this dried first layer. Okay, it's pretty important to add this layer when the first layer is pretty much dried, so there's no random blendings happening. The brush strokes are pretty controllable. I'm using very loose brush strokes too. Pushing with the side of my brush, so I create large brush strokes. Using the tip of my brush to make smaller dotting brush strokes. And then painting the grass second layer too, using this darker shade of green here and there. Now using my observation skills to paint the thin shades between the different parts of the houses, especially on the right hand side, which is away from the light source, from the sunshine. Also underneath the little roofs. Okay, very small brush strokes, but it's really important to add dimension for the houses, but not adding too much. Adding the shade color for the cars underneath using ultramarine blue mixed with green and a little bit of purple for everything. And keep adding more second layer textures for this tree here. Again, this is a mix of viridian green and a little bit of brown, using dotting brush strokes to show the texture of the leaves. And now I'm using even smaller brush strokes to paint the leaves on this tree here, using the tip of my brush and not pushing too hard. Keep it really simple too. Another layer by mixing a little bit of ultramarine blue into the original green. And then add a little bit shadow for the tree trunk. Paint the tree trunk. And finally, I'm just adding very small brush strokes, especially for some shade parts that I missed here and there, not using too much brush strokes or too dark colors. Right, so here's the look of the finished sketch. Here it is. So it took me about 25 minutes to finish this sketch. So thank you so much for watching my video. If you like it, please click like and leave me a comment below. Subscribe to my channel for weekly updates. I will see you next time.